back. I'm Michael Stamatinos, your host for Advancing Healthcare Innovation Show. And if you're new to us, we are just crazy passionate about healthcare innovation and adoption. And our aim is to bring stories on innovation within healthcare. What we're doing here is we're highlighting real people who are truly innovating within the space. And look, we've got an action-packed year planned ahead of us with some amazing interviews, some amazing content. And if you haven't checked out any of the other interviews before, make sure you go back and check them out. I just want to encourage you, wherever you're consuming this content, hit subscribe right now. Content's going to come to you. And I'm just delighted today to bring just an extraordinary human being onto the show, Paul Hawkinson, who's a strategy and finance professor, as well as co-founder and executive director of Transform Capital. Paul, welcome to the show.
So good to be with you, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Paul, I think your story is just so powerful. And, one of the things that we're trying to do here is to highlight, real people that are doing some pretty incredible things in the marketplace. And your history of how you got here. Would you mind maybe just sharing with the audience a little bit of a snippet of sort of your background and kind of how it's dovetailed today into what you're doing with Transform Capital, and then we can kind of start to kind of dissect that and go from there.
Sounds great. Yeah, it's a long and twisting journey. I think that the high points, which kind of are salient for what I'm doing now. I grew up in the city of Chicago, went to Chicago public schools, and saw through the lens of mostly my teammates playing basketball throughout the city, some of the realities in the communities around, specifically West and South Chicago. And then as I got into my career, I ended up in a 17-year journey toward being a senior investment banker, doing merger and acquisition work, financing work for private equity firms and big industrial companies. And long story short, in 2012, I had the job that I thought I was always working toward. I was running a group, and yet I just realized that I had a deep desire to harness all that creativity that I saw on Wall Street, not for the benefit of another private equity firm, but actually for disinvested communities in and around Chicagoland. And so kind of tying together my history and what I believe my skill set is. And so I left that world in 2012. My wife would tell you it's been like a decades long midlife crisis that continues. But really, I've spent a lot of my time at the intersection of kind of service to others and creative business structures. And that's really where my heart is.
That's awesome. When I think about how I define healthcare, it's very broad.
Yeah.
And the work that you're doing with Transform Capital, when I think about, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, my background in psychology, you think about the base of the pyramid, which is, food and shelter. Can you maybe share a little bit about Transform Capital, the mission, and sort of how that kind of ties into healthcare, especially from a health equity point of view, and which is a big buzzword, but I think I want to make it concrete so that people know how you're actually doing health equity and providing access, which that's one of my biggest passions is access. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. Let's dig in.
That's it. It's that word. It's access. And I was at a conference once, and someone was speaking on the fact that your health is far more correlated to your zip code than your genetic code, right? And if you look at a number of these disinvested communities, they lack access, same assets, same human potential, incredible people, and yet access is lacking. And it's not only to healthcare and education, but you're right, it's at the bottom of the pyramid. It's access to affordable, high quality housing, access to local employment, access to food, access to all of those things. And so Transform Capital plays into this. We really have a heart to invest in the flourishing of others. And we know that flourishing is far more than economics, but economics matter, right? The fact that you and I have been able to own a home or a business over long periods of time, kind of compounded return that allows us to reinvest in our health, in life experience, et cetera. And so we formed a 100% nonprofit bank called Transform Capital. And so there are a number of community lenders, but we raise all of our capital in the form of tax-deductible donations. We turn that capital into market rate mortgages and business loans to equip local asset owners in disinvested communities to be owners and to create that kind of access and stability. And then the cool thing is that we actually journey with our clients for decades. And so we show up the next day after, putting them into a beautiful home, and we say, now what do you do? What do you want to do? What are your dreams? I want to grow my small business. Great. And we harness the potential of our network to walk alongside and journey alongside these incredibly deserving men and women over the long journey of asset ownership. And so if you put all that together, we're providing access to capital for many families that kind of fall between the discrimination of the big banks historically and the ravages of payday loan stores in many of these communities. And we create fully recyclable capital so that our clients realize that by paying a loan back to us, it's not going to Michael's interest accrual. It's actually going to make ownership possible for a neighbor. And so if you put that in the context of health equity, stability in housing, owner-occupied housing in communities is a central hallmark of stability and economic opportunity within communities. So that's where we begin.
That's phenomenal. Look, it's been a tough last 24 months. And started this at a time where it couldn't have been needed anymore. Let's share some real life stories of impact and just seeing how you guys have been able to innovate throughout these last, several months.
Yeah, I appreciate you framing it in that way too, because our capital comes in the form of donations. We say that stories are the currency with which we repay our investors. And so that is really the way that we think about it. And not just stories for those we serve, but also the transformation is mutual, right? By being in proximity with these dear people, there's a lot that I've learned about life as well. So here are a few. Our first clients, Yeltsin and Loida, 6 years ago came from California, didn't know if they'd have enough gas money with their two kids to even physically get to Illinois. They got here, fast forward 5 years later, through one of our partners, they are in a beautiful, brand new home, which in North Chicago, a block and a half from Lake Michigan, still is well under $200,000 in value because of the arbitrage in this community. And now Yeltsin has a small pest control business, and our network has shown up around him to help him expand that pest control business to care for his family and ultimately create that kind of stability that leads to the outcomes that we're seeking. The second one I'd share is just a month ago, we closed on a home for a 39-year-old young man who is paralyzed from a shooting, an accidental shooting that transpired in 2016. He was literally living on someone's couch and then in a 12 by 12 hotel room with very low access to high quality foods. He's now in a brand new renovated home, wheelchair accessible, designed by and for him, and absolutely thriving with a new life ahead. And so this happens not just through us, but through an incredible array of partners that we work through in these communities. But those are just a few of the recent stories that we've had the privilege of being involved in.
When you think about innovation isn't a static word. It's a word that moves. It's a word that, applies action. And these are just incredible stories.
well, they are credible, they are believable. And where else can this go? What other areas do you see that this can be applicable towards? What is sort of the vision? I know kind of how you sort of conceptualize things. Have you thought about maybe a year or two down the road what this could really lead into, or even years down the road?
Yeah, there are a number of wonderful community lenders, often called CDFIs, that are doing incredible work in this way. I think one of the differences is that most of their capital comes in the form of loans. And there's a lot of advantages to that, but it adds to an incredible amount of complexity, because to make a loan to a deserving family, I need to worry about paying Michael back next week or Bank of America next month. So we are really compelled by the fact that in year one, because of our model and our capital base, we're already covering 100% of our costs. So every dollar we raise recycles for the community. So we are already in conversation with Omaha. We're in conversation with Washington. We're in conversation with villages in Alaska about replicating this model. And the cool thing is we have nothing to protect. We would love to give away our model to see other communities benefit from this concept of recyclable capital. The second thing I'd say is broader than just what we're doing. If you think of the world that I come out of on Wall Street, there's this concept of arbitrage, right? And you have the same assets in two different markets that have very different values for some reason. And through a Wall Street perspective, you think about accessing that value and creating a profit for us. A lot of what we're trying to do is looking at the same two human assets in two different communities that the world has placed a radically different value on. And to profit from that, but not for us, but to turn that profit back to the very community, right, where the assets are. And so we're really compelled more broadly about accessing the innovation in others' minds through other products as a way to kind of capture that arbitrage that's there, but not for our benefit, but actually to turn it back to these incredible communities to see them flourish.
That's beautiful. Now I think about healthcare. Healthcare is very local. It's regionalized. It's local. It's relational. What are your thoughts around the delivery of healthcare, access to healthcare? Where do you see Transform Capital fitting into that piece of the puzzle? Have you explored any of those areas? And just if we can ideate here for a minute, what would that even look like?
Yeah, I think we're at the genesis of it. In addition to doing home loans, we're really focused on economic development and adding other services in the community that would serve the community well. Our initial community, North Chicago, Illinois, sits right between some of the wealthiest districts, right, in the state of Illinois, some of the finest hospital settings within 4 or 5 miles. And even a mile away is a VA hospital at the naval base, the Rosalind Franklin medical education facility as well. And yet, as soon as you hit the naval base and go into the corridor of downtown North Chicago, everything changes, right? Disposable income falls by 80%. Housing stability falls by 60%. Poverty rate goes up 15-fold. And so what we're seeing in healthcare is a lot of incredible local nonprofits doing, pop-up education centers in the community for education, for COVID vaccination, for all of those services that should be resident in the infrastructure of a community are having to be reimagined in a different way to provide access to these families. And so what I would say is, as we're a part of creating more economic vibrancy in the community, our hope is that we can move from more of a transient model of bringing that care in to infrastructure that's more permanent, that is serving that community well.
Yeah, I mean, think big, start small. move efficiently and quickly. Where where else do you see some of the blockers being? Obviously, when you're talking about innovation, there's an aspect of it which, which is the allure, the results, the positivity that emanates from it. And then there's the other side, the dark side that really isn't spoken about, where you're let down a lot. Can you maybe even highlight, because obviously this is a real thing. I mean, what have been some of the letdowns that you have seen, or maybe ones that you're kind of preparing for?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. Some of the stories are not easy. Some of the stories are very hard. We closed on this home for our client Rod a month ago, and literally 9 days later, a young man was killed a block and a half away. And so you have this journey where you sense these mountaintop moments and the hope that will be there for Rod and this community, and then you're reminded, right, of the work that is ahead for those who live in this community and are trying to make it better. And so there is a generational impact, right, of lack of access to food. This is a community that got its first grocery store in over 30 years a few months ago. And so there are generational treble impacts in housing, in security, and access to services, and access to healthcare. And I think sometimes anyone who comes in with a deep desire to help, you're right, looks for those returns, looks for those immediate stories. And the reality is the journey is hard, and there will be ups and downs. And the last thing I'd say is, one of the other dark sides of community service is sometimes that we feel that we're bringing the solution right into the community. And we're really, really careful to let the community lead. The assets are in the community. The assets aren't something that we're bringing. These are dear, deeply talented families. And so before we impose our vision of what flourishing looks like, we're really careful to start by asking them, what are their dreams and goals? And if we want everyone to live into physical and emotional and spiritual well-being, it needs to start with their own dreams and what they feel called to do. And then we follow that. And so I think that's another risk, is to always check ourselves and to make sure that it's not our imposition, but rather simply coming alongside our clients and making sure that they lead.
What you said there is so profound, because you are meeting people where they are at. Oftentimes what I see is that there's solutions that are positioned with the intent, good intent.
Yeah.
But it also requires the level of thinking that, like, hey, they're going to be here. But the reality is that they're not. We tend to see this a lot with technology, especially being deployed in different environments. And there are aspects of that where there's an assumption on the solution provider's side, thinking that, like, well, they got to be here to start. But what if the starting line's like way back there?
Yes.
You can incrementally get it to that point. And it sounds like what you're saying is that truly, that if you are going to make this a grassroots approach, that they're going to have to drive it.
Yeah.
It can't be something you can mandate and put some whole nice words on a wall. It's like it has to happen organically. And it's funny, just because I feel like maybe this is very serendipitous, but it's sort of this incremental evolution that's happening. And oftentimes, maybe we're a part of it. Maybe we can plant the seed, but we don't control when that happens or what time it happens. That's kind of out of our control. So that's really interesting you brought that up.
Yeah, and I'll give you a practical example of how sometimes I bring my lens in, and that lens needs to be checked at the door. We had a client who wanted to grow his business, and we connected him with someone in our network to help him do that. And we were on a conference call, and he was talking about growing his business and selling it for liquidity. And I'm an investment banker, so I'm attracted to this kind of growth mindset. And I got off the call and I asked our client what he thought, and he said, "You know what, Paul? Yeah, I want to grow my business, but I only want to grow it a little bit because I want to have time to be at home with my family, and I want to serve at my church, and I want to be a part of my community. And so I was the one out in my car writing down in my journal that that's actually what I needed to hear, right? About what it means to flourish, right? For him, he was defining what it means to flourish, and it's far more than economic. It's about life margin, and so that's a great example of kind of the mutual benefits of doing this work.
Yeah, you learn from people as you go along the way, and sometimes you get memos from the head office from people in positions from you.
Indeed, indeed.
So how can people follow the work of Transform Capital? I mean, look, if you had your sort of you could wave a magic wand, you had a room full of the right people.
Yeah.
What's the ask? I mean, how can we support this incredible mission?
Yeah, thank you. So we invite people to bring a gift, but also to bring themselves. You know, what we're excited about is there's so many people in the marketplace who maybe go volunteer by painting at a home, and that's fine. But how much more exciting is it if you can bring your giftedness in law, in entrepreneurship, in healthcare, in other markets to the work, right, to the volunteer work? And so here are our needs. Capital is obviously one. Our smallest gift has been $10. Our largest gift has been $100,000. In our first year, we put out over $650,000 in loans and are covering 100% of our costs. So obviously, we're really interested to get connected to donors, institutional donors, and individual donors of all sizes who might resonate with our work. And second, I'm delighted to spend some time with anyone in the community. Come out and drive around the community of North Chicago, learn about its history, meet some of the incredible people. And every time we do that, there's a light that goes off in someone's head about how they can bring their own giftedness into the process of seeking the flourishing of our neighbors. And so we'd be delighted to chat with anyone. We also have community members that are as far away as California, so you don't have to be local to be a part of this movement. And those are some of the ways that you can get involved.
That's incredible. We'll definitely link that, in the description when we post this. So just for those of you that are just, joining right now, if this content is helpful for you, would you mind sharing it on your social media channels? Or would you mind commenting on it? Would you mind liking it? I'm just so grateful when we can get a community of doers together, people that like SD, get stuff done, and not just sit around and ideate, rather get out there, get their hands dirty. It's one thing to, it's important to strategize, and it's also really important to execute. And it's wonderful to see someone like you that's executing and doing this. So we invite more people into this community, and we're grateful when we've got more innovators that are out there that are, growing this community. So Paul, it's been just an amazing privilege to know you and to know the work that you're doing, and all the best to you. And we'd love to hear more stories as this mission and this movement continues to grow.
Well, you, Michael, have been a big impact on me, and I know many others. And so thanks for all of your work, and for this work in particular in shining light on healthcare innovation. So great to be with you as always.
It's my pleasure. Look forward to our next chat.